You're on mute, Rick.
Great start. Hello, thank you, Connor. Hello and welcome to the last one on Spurs. It's been those few days already. It has been. If you're with us for the first time, you can find us. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're back, we're here, and we're not quite sure what comes next. The show has been titled The State of Play. What is the state of play with regards to all things Tottenham? We're joined by three fabulous returning regular guests to Last One Spurs. Billy T is back after a 48-hour hiatus. Bill, how are you? Love to see you back on.
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good to be on with this great panel as always. Looking forward to getting into it, mate. Went to the darts yesterday, so I finally had a bit of exciting sport back in my life. It's been a while, so yeah, mate. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Saw some attacking action, Bill, did you?
I did, finally. Bit gung-ho.
Also back on the show, always a pleasure. Ash is back from the Spurs Kings. Ash, lovely to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me back on. A little bit under the weather, but that's what Spurs will do to you, right?
Absolutely. And more.
Yeah, man. Apologies for us starting a little bit late, but we're here, man, and we're about to get into therapy session. I'm going to call it a therapy session right now. I think that's what we all need.
Who quite knows where the show's going to take us? Ash, thank you so much. And also a man that we've missed on this show. He's been away to a long annual leave away from Last One on Spurs, but he's clocked back in at potentially the right or the wrong time, depending on how you gauge the mood at the moment. Connor's back, leaving on 82. Con, how are you? Lovely to have you back on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. Good to be on with Bill and Ash as well. It has been a while, so it's good to be back on. A lot has happened in that time, so there's a fair amount to chew over in Tottenham land. But yeah, therapy session is very apt, I think, Ash, for sure.
Yep. Absolutely. Con, listen, Bill, Ash, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, if you can for us out there, if you can hit the subscribe button to share this out to a wide range Spurs audience, of course, also by hitting that subscribe button, that will allow you to interact in the live chat as we go across quite fiery debates on the show. If you also hit that like button and hype to the show, that would be greatly appreciated. On the agenda for this show, we'll be discussing over the last 48 hours, Tottenham briefing the media that they are backing Thomas Frank. ENIC at the moment taking that stance. Is that the right? Is that the wrong stance? We'll be coming on to that and more with regards to Thomas Frank and his immediate future as Tottenham Hotspur head coach. Micky van der Ven has, of course, also had an interview with The Overlap. We'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of that interview, what we've made of it, with a lot of different also things to come out of there, which are really, really interesting to discuss. Brennan Johnson, a player that hasn't seen a huge amount of football, of course, under Thomas Frank, Tottenham's top goal scorer last season, and of course the goal scorer of our Europa League trophy win, is being reported with a move ahead of the upcoming January transfer window. Will Tottenham cash in on Brennan Johnson? Is that the right thing to do? We'll certainly get into that and more. We're waiting on further news as to whether Matt Wells, of course, Tottenham Hotspur's first team coach, will be departing the football club. What would that mean for Tottenham if Matt Wells does depart in terms of how that coaching staff infrastructure will work? Will it be a blow? We'll be coming on to that and more in this last word on Spurs. And it looks like also Tottenham are closing in on yet another member of a potential board appointment. Spurs, they're understood to be looking, well, I say looking, it's now becoming likelier than ever. They will be bringing Moersen to join the Tottenham Hotspur board in a form of a role in the operational department. So we'll be coming on to that. Connor will be giving us his thoughts as to how that could shake up things in the boardroom. But look, guys, we do need to open with regards to Thomas Frank and where we are. One question that I would love to pose to you guys on the show, which you can come and answer straight after this, and to the audience, actually, or those on audio and watch the show on YouTube. Jason McGovern dropped me a message. He's currently in Thailand. I can tell you having a great time away from all things Tottenham. And he wanted me to ask the audience that, how can a club whose two biggest aims for the year, or in the last couple of years, or for many years, was to win a trophy and to have the departure of Daniel Levy be at such a low ebb within 6 months of achieving both? We'd love to get your views on that. So let us know in the comments what you make of that question. But look, in terms of where we are with Thomas Frank's immediate future as things stands, well, Tottenham Hotspur, despite the form we're finding in right now, appear to be throwing their weight behind the Dane. Frank, though, is facing internal doubts, but sources insist there'll be no knee-jerk reaction to that loss at Nottingham Forest. There is a sense there is no immediate threat to Frank's position at Spurs, despite that defeat to Forest and another poor performance. That's not to say that the backing for Frank is entirely universal behind the scenes at Spurs. There's well-placed sources that suggested after the Fulham loss that Frank's performance had come increasingly into more scrutiny, and the apparent disdain from sections of the supporters towards Frank during the opening half of the season, although it's been seen as an unsavoury dynamic, has not go unnoticed or unnoted by the Tottenham Hotspur hierarchy. However, they are yet to reach a point so far whereby this season at the moment are giving consideration to dispensing of the Dane. There is a willingness at Tottenham to give Frank the opportunity to lay the foundations towards a path to success, similar to the one that Vinay Venkatesham stuck by Mikel Arteta during some of Arsenal's lowest depths. Now, that report was also backed up by The Athletic, who are 100% kind of doubling down on that fact that Thomas Frank is going to be given the backing of the hierarchy. And while there have been discussions at the club about Frank's future, these have been fairly regular meetings of the type that all clubs will have about their staffing and direction, rather than anything specific reacting to events. And sources with knowledge of the situation, speaking of the condition of an anonymity to protect relationships, indicated the clear position of the majority shareholding Lewis family is to stick with Frank and give him the time to rebuild the squad. And there's an awareness that not only is Frank trying to rebuild a squad, he's trying to rebuild the whole culture, and a recognition of the fact that the situation is going to take time. Frank is believed ahead of the upcoming January transfer window to want to strengthen Spurs in a number of departments, and is looking for experience, which doesn't necessarily mean older players, but players who are going to directly improve the first team. Bissouma, no one will be surprised to know he's one of the players that is believed to be looking likelier than ever to leave Spurs in this upcoming January transfer window, with other fringe players likely to be moved on. We want to start on that conversation. We're going to come over to you, Bill. Look, you've had 48 hours or so, 72 hours to process since that Forest defeat where you were with us. I want to get your thoughts on that, because I think for someone like you, I think, look, giving a manager time, if he shows you kind of a principle, a facet of play, development of players, would obviously make sense to give someone time. But again, there are fans out there that feel that the manager hasn't had or showed us any real credit in the bank to deserve time. Where are you on those reports that we're having now suggesting Tottenham are standing by the Dane?
Yeah, exactly as you just pretty much summarised there perfectly, to be honest, mate. I completely agree. I think I like the idea of giving the manager time and backing. I think, I hate to mention them, seem to do it all the time at the moment, but they are a blueprint in Arsenal that when you give a manager time and consistent back in the transfer window, you are going to see the rewards of that, which like they did for Arteta. But having said that, I think if you're backing the wrong man and giving the wrong man time, it's a waste of everyone's time even further, isn't it? So, and then on top of that, you've got a waste of transfer funds too. I think it's important that we do have someone to come in and reset the culture. I think we've lost our culture over the last few, under terrible ownership over the last few years. I personally, and again, we're not going to get into too much in this debate. I like the way that Ange used to talk about football and talk about winning. And I'm not saying I want to bring Ange back or anything like that. That's the kind of culture that I want at Tottenham, a culture of, relentless winning, relentless attacking football. I don't think Thomas Frank is the right man to build a culture at Tottenham. I don't think, my personal opinion is, I think the job swallowed him up. I think that, he's going into press conferences. I don't find it inspiring on a personal level. I don't find that his football inspiring whatsoever. I don't think this is the right guy to back. I don't think he's shown enough to be the guy. If we're going to go and spend a lot of money in January and a lot of money in summer, I don't think Thomas Frank has done enough to warrant that money, and I don't think he's done enough to warrant that backing. And the big concern for me is I don't see him turning it around either. I know we've got two really difficult Premier League games coming up, Liverpool, Palace. If we lose both of those, which at the moment you'd have to say is quite likely, then what are we doing? We're going to be sort of languishing in mid to bottom table again. I know we're going to talk about in a minute. The stats, surrounding Thomas Frank and the football are of a massive concern to me. So while I like the idea of giving someone time, I don't think this is the guy to give time to.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you in a second, but Con, I want to come to you. I've not had you on the show for quite a while. One of the things that I do want to bring up, which again I thought was very, very interesting, Owen _ THFC shared this on X. And what I'm referring to is pretty much where we were this time 11 years ago, where Spurs had just drawn at home to Crystal Palace. And at this point, Pochettino was in the job for 5 months. And for those that will read the report, it's almost like an identical situation to where Thomas Frank is now, which is why some fans kind of will feel they're not yet at a point where they want to sack Thomas Frank. And, we have to remember Pochettino did start poorly. Fans wanted him gone. But there was that point under Pochettino where he dropped a number of senior players at the time, the likes of the Adebayors, the Kabuls, Capues, and then started playing young players. That, of course, saw almost instant success. Harry Kane exploded onto the scene. Look, it's difficult to say we've got a Harry Kane in the ranks at the moment. We've got to be honest about that. There's a lot of excitement around, obviously, Luca Williams-Barnett, a very, very young player. And, of course, as well, you've got Micky Moore currently on loan at Rangers. But I ask you, you was a massive, massive fan of Thomas Frank when he first came into the job, avidly backing the man in the early days, where even at those periods in the early moments of the first 3, 4, 5 weeks after Bournemouth, for example, many fans had their doubts. Where are you kind of on the back of the news that at the moment it appears Spurs are going to be back in the game?
Yeah, I think you've both made some very good points, right? I think for me, I was, absolutely a massive advocate of the Frank appointment when it was made. But I think, and I think he had done a job at Brentford that made him worthy of being given the chance to step up. However, I think so far he hasn't demonstrated anything that sort of supports that view, right? And I think, we can come on to some other things that are potentially bigger than the manager. But for me, just on Frank, just to directly answer your question, I think the only reason anyone is making the argument to give him more time right now, and I'm still just about in that situation, is just because we're conditioned to think that we should give managers more time, right? I don't think he has demonstrated anything yet what you can get behind to say, look, he's doing this facet of play, or there's this green shoot over here, or he's developing this player, which actually supports that. I think it's just because we know that managers need to be given time. And I think everyone uses Arteta as the blueprint, right? As to why you should give a manager more time, but not every manager is an Arteta. And I think, like Bill, I don't want to get into speaking about Arsenal or giving that lot any credit at all. But I think the one thing with Arteta, I despise him as a bloke, right? And I despise what he's like on the side of the pitch. But you can't deny that he has a certain charisma, personality, bigger than life. He went into Arsenal, got rid of the bad eggs in terms of Aubameyang and Ozil and those types. And I think, obviously was backed heavily by the board. I think he just had that certain aura. As it stands right now, I'm very happy to admit, if I'm just reflecting on what I've seen so far, I was wrong, right, in terms of my view on Frank. Now, that's not to say he couldn't change it with more time, clearly. But as it stands, I was wrong. And I think the problem is it's a very different prospect managing a Tottenham Hotspur or an Arsenal or a Chelsea than it is to managing a Brentford or a Brighton or a Bournemouth. Iriola's the prime example right now. I think Bournemouth have won one game in 7 or something, I think it is. No one's even really speaking about that because Iriola manages Bournemouth. If he was managing Tottenham, that would be plastered all over social media, all over papers, etc., right? So, I think it's it comes with a different level of pressure. And I think the problem for Frank at Tottenham as well is he's come into what is an absolutely toxic culture of a football club now, which has suffered a structural decline since we moved into the new stadium as a result of underinvestment before we moved into that new stadium, which then led to a expensive rebuild where we then spent money on shit players, right? So, and never made the wages match that. And so what we're now seeing, this is all the fruits of basically ENIC and Levy's legacy. So to Jason's question of, we've got the things that we wanted, i.e. the trophy. Yes, but we got that trophy when we finished 17th. So it wasn't the cherry on top of a fantastic season. If we won a trophy when Poch was here, when we were, every week enjoying watching Tottenham play football, that's very different. And then the second part of it, and we've got Levy gone. Yes, we have, but unfortunately, we've got Levy's legacy for some time, and that legacy cannot be undone, unfortunately, in the short term. And so, I think we need if the ownership is not going to change, right? And when I say the ownership changing, I don't mean this just reinvention of the Lewis family versus ENIC. I mean, a complete change which completely changes the culture, a la Mike Ashley to Piff, right, and Newcastle. Then what you need is an absolute figurehead of a manager that you can get behind. And as it stands right now, I'm not sure Frank is that man. Now, that's not to say that I'm still debating whether it's right to say that he should go now, because I think, changing the manager mid-season, to me, you normally would only do that, to be honest. I think if you've definitely got someone better lined up, because you want to give that next manager the best chance of success. They get a full pre-season, a proper transfer window, etc. Or you're at imminent threat of, the season being a complete write-off or relegation. Now we're probably getting close to it being a write-off if we continue on this vein of form, and we're going to look at some of the stats later. But that's the only reason why I would still give him a little bit more time. But I absolutely appreciate why fans might have already said, let's cut our losses here.
Yeah. I'm in this difficult quandary, and people might say, look, I'm playing devil's advocate because I'm just hosting the show, right? And I'm not putting my foot firmly in either camp. Do I feel 4 months, Ash, coming over to you, is long enough to judge a manager? No, I don't. Have I seen anything back to what I've asked the guys here already, whether what I've seen deserves more time? Probably not. So I'm in this difficult quandary right now where I've been scrambling really over the last 48, 72 hours since the Forest post-match show we did to really know what's right now. I mean, I don't think I've ever... Look, we've seen depressing times as Spurs fans, right, in general, 100%, but there is just this almost acceptance right now. Things aren't going to get better. And I'm actually not sure, as of right now, what to do to change that. You might get an immediate lift by sacking Frank for some, but then who's to say, with regards to the next person coming in, is it going to be like an almost mini lift where, again, once you might get a few good performances and there's a dip again? This is the problem where I look at our squad, and I mean this with no disrespect, because I'm aware that a lot of the coaches, playing staff watch the show, and in general, the squad that we've assembled is nowhere near the level of what we had under that Pochettino era, to the point where I'm not even sure. I don't think even one player gets even anywhere near the first 11 of that squad, or even in the first 11, just to be very, very clear as well. I mean, Ash, where are you just on the back of the news initially around the club, from what we're hearing from the media, essentially backing Frank right now?
Do you know what? I have to echo a lot of the thoughts and sentiments of my fellow colleagues on the panel today, and a lot of people in the chat as well. As fans, we are very emotional. We're attached to the club. We watch it day in, day out. We know these players better than anyone else. So it's like millions of people, we're all coaches. Do you know what I'm saying? We all got our opinions, and we know what needs to be fixed. And it's not like we've been here for 4 months. It's not like we've been here for years. We've been put through so much over the last 5 years, in my opinion, since Pochettino, even 6 years, since Pochettino's left. And I think every manager and every style of play and, all of that is being judged with Frank at the moment. So Frank's getting a lot of judgment because of what Pochettino, in my opinion, did with that squad. And the reason why you're not sure, Ricky, is what Connor said as well. It's because it's been 4 months. 4 months in anything is not a long time. So there's a lot of fans that are like, well, we can't sack him. It's 4 months. Like, that's crazy. You got to at least give him another window. But it comes back to the change at the top. And the reason why it comes back to the change at the top is because there's been so many changes. So much things have happened at the top. And so we know that Vinay and Levy and maybe a few others, they had a decision to get rid of Ange, right? After the actual cup win. And for a lot of fans, they've never experienced that on the high road. Like, even when we won the League Cup, like, it wasn't like that, bro. To get it. So, like, even like, I know we're going to talk about it later, but even the players, the way they fell in love with the club, the relationship we have with the actual players itself, it's another level. So Frank walking into that was always going to be hard. So that's where the emotions come into it, and we're like, how do we get rid of Ange for Frank when we're looking for a higher step, not a sideways step, if that makes sense? Because you're looking at a manager that's come from Brentford, no disrespect, but the size of the club, even the size of the stadium, even when we were playing Forest, I remember their attendance said 30,000. And for us, we were complaining about 46,000 people turning up. That was a bad day for us. Do you get it? So you could just tell the size of the club is just completely different. The level of scrutiny is completely different. But waffling on now, let me get to the point. I personally think strategically, I think they might have made a mistake, because if you're moving from Ange Postecoglou, knowing that the fans want attacking football, buying players for an attacking manager, wouldn't it make more sense to go for another attacking manager? Now, I hear what you're saying. Frank was meant to be that attacking manager that was somewhere in between. If that makes sense. He's the one that's meant to help us defensively. But we can now see defensively, we're no better off. In fact, I'm sure
we're worse. Going to come into it.
You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to separate my emotions, because that's short-termism. Do you know what I mean? If I'm looking at long-termism, is he the man that's going to suit the style of what? Because even when he plays, like, if I've been fair, Prague and Brentford, he played attacking football. Let's be real. Let's be honest. But even within that, you can still feel the conservatism in him. The approach, there's still a level of pragmatism. I'm not saying these words right, by the way. I'm killing these words. But yeah, there's still, even when he starts to go, and like the way he, like you said, press conferences, everything about him, shouts safety, safe guy. He's the nice guy. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the reason why Spence can bend up his face like that. Do you get it? So if I'm being real, I said to myself, look, like Connor said, you know what? You need to give him a season and da. But I'm like, long term, can I see him getting us top 4? I'm not too sure. Can I see Thomas Frank lifting trophies with us? I don't. I've got more questions than I have answers. And rightly so, because obviously he's been a manager for 13 years. And on those 13 years, you're looking at his track record in terms of like credentials, what he's won. And it's like, well, you're sacking Ange, for that trophy lift to get a man that's going to be on work experience, essentially, because he's never done 2 games a week. Let's be real. So he's literally learning on the job, but we're expecting us, because that's why he keeps saying 17th. We were 17th. And fans don't like that. What do you mean we're 17th? We finished 5th the season before. We're not a 17th. And now I've got opposition fans saying to me as well, no. You're about a 17th club. Like, you should be happy 11th. Even some Spurs fans believe, now looking at the squad, that this squad is 11th place team. Do you understand? And I'm saying, I'm looking at other coaches, and the patterns of play is important. Let's not skim over that. There's a lot of, like, we're not seeing anything we can kind of put our hat on or hang our hat on. We can't. We cannot see it. And so a lot of fans might not like this, innit? But I'm just thinking, logically, if I put my emotions to one side, is he the right fit if he's a pragmatist at heart? Do you know what I mean? If he's safety, because when he was in the Championship, because I'll be real, he did play the kind of possession-based attacking football. But then when he went to the Premiership, he realized he couldn't do that. I feel like that scarred him, and he's brought that into Spurs. And I feel like he's even more pragmatic now than he was at Brentford, even. Because we're not even seeing counter-attacking football, even. And also, the last point I'll make, because I'm going on a tangent, I feel like the fans have spoken up and the board have listened. They passed the information on to Frank. At home, you can't do this defensive. Paulinho and Bentancur in the midfield. We need progression on the pitch. We need to see some forward-thinking players. We need to see some attacking football. So Frank has catered. He's listened. He's taken Paulinho out, or he's taken Bentancur out. So we've seen the midfield swap. And at times, I looked at that Forest game, and I was like, how do we look so open? This reminds me of Angeball. Why is the fullbacks inverting like this? Do you know what I'm saying? Why is the gap so, like, forget the inverted fullbacks, like, forget that for one side, but why is there so many gaps? Do you know what I'm saying? In the midfield, when we brought you to sort that and solve that issue. So then I'm looking at it thinking, did we concede less goals when Paulinho and Bentancur were in the midfield? I'm not advocating for it, because I know he lose the forward passing, But then it's down to the coach, not the fans, to kind of figure those problems out. Do you know what I mean? And people will say, it's too, there's other incidents as well. I'm not just saying that, but you could just see when you watch, if you ever go to a home game, like the reason why the fans are booing at half time, not even full time, half time, it's because they're watching dross and they know the players that we have are better than what we're actually seeing. Do you know what I'm saying? But Ricky, to caveat my own point, I still think these players, I looked at Nottingham Forest's midfield and I was like, Anderson,
yeah, we don't get, there's not a Tottenham player tomorrow. There's not a
player
Tottenham midfield. Yeah.
Gibbs White, even though people were on 50-50 with him, Anderson, Gibbs White, and Sangari. I said, listen, like as much as I like our midfielders, like and the prospects, and how we're trying to, they already admitted that youth-centric model, it failed. They got it wrong. Do you understand? So we're bringing that failure, do you know what I'm saying? The essence of it into this season here. And we know those players need team against a well-established Premier League team. Do you get it? Yeah. So as soon as I heard that the fans, anyway, Ricky, take over.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Ash, we are getting some feedback on the mic, so we might ask you to adjust or to loosen the mic for us. That would be great. Bill, I want to come round to you in terms of the data of where we are right now. And look, we don't, of course, get that data live straight after post-match, obviously, games. So we're bringing that data now in terms of where we are, which, again, is not great reading, but gives us kind of an idea in terms of where we are in comparison to previous years. And look, I'm always someone that doesn't want to compare one manager to another manager, because I've always said this with Ange Postecoglou on this show, that look, this is the way I am. It's not for everybody. Many people want to criticize or chastise or whatever. For me, I was so grateful to Ange, no matter how I felt about his football in general. He won us a trophy. He gets his flowers. I don't like bemoaning or, really saying anything bad mouth in a manager that gave us a great moment. But in terms of where Tottenham are after 16 games of this season at the moment, we do sit, as everyone knows, we're 11th in the table. We've won 6, we've drawn 4, we've lost 6, we've scored 25, we've conceded 21, we've got 22 points. And after 16 games of last season, we were 10th in the table. We won 7, we drawn 2, we lost 7, we scored 36, we conceded 19, we got a point more. So in relation to, the 2 seasons there, when you compare them, we scored more goals, we conceded less, we've got an extra point. I think it was also quite scary that you shared me, Bill, actually, before we started the show, is of the 96 teams within the top 5 leagues, Spurs, we rank at the moment 3rd in XG over performance, 75th in XG difference per 90, 87th in XG created per 90, 53rd in XG conceded per 90, 84th in shots per 90, 45th in progressive passes, and 38th in touches in the penalty area. And just to be clear, that's of the 96 teams within the top 5 leagues, those stats I've read you. And a comparison that we're sharing on screen for listeners on audio here compares Frank to Postecoglou. Now, just to be very, very clear, this stat I'm showing here is not a stat or, a reference to say, bring Ange Postecoglou back. Why we're sharing this stat on the show is why there is so much frustration around Tottenham's inability they've shown under Thomas Frank so far. And the fact is, Bill, bringing you back in, is that when you sack the previous manager for winning the club its first trophy in over 2 decades, saying it's not enough and we must compete on all 4 fronts, the fans are going to then rightly hold the new manager accountable to those expectations of ENIC and what they've said. And we can clearly see here, based on these statistics, we're worse off than where we was after 16 games last season, Bill. How do you react to that? Just to get you on mute.
Yeah, okay. So I think there's a lot to go into there, so I'll try and be quick with most of it. I think the concern for me, right, like there are just certain things that we, like the bare minimum for Spurs fans is, when I was a kid, I was brought up when my dad showed me things about Glenn Hoddle and Chris Waddle. When I was a Spurs fan as a kid, I got, players like Gareth Bale, young Klinsmann. We're brought up on attacking football, on flair players, Ginola, Waddle, Hoddle, Klinsmann. Like, it's part of our identity as a football club, Paul Gascoigne and people like that. And I think the bare minimum for Tottenham fans at the moment, as the last 2 years have shown, is you have to be attacking football to succeed at Tottenham. This doesn't work. And certain fan bases are different. Every single fan base is different in the Premier League. But I think Tottenham fans, we've had a diet of these amazing flair players throughout our career, throughout our time as a Spurs fan. We're conditioned to want to see attacking football. And when those stats put it cold there, then we're not only one of the worst attacking teams in the league, but one of the very worst in Europe as well. The bottom percentile across Europe's top 5 leagues, it's not going to fly. Like, you can't sit there as a Tottenham manager and be expected to be given time if you're literally one of the worst attacking teams in Europe's top 5 leagues. It's not going to work. And I think the biggest concern for me is, and I think it's really important to point out what you said at the beginning. We're not saying that we want Ange back just because we're comparing the two stats there. What we're saying is Ange was sacked with the proviso that we're going to be better and we're going to compete on all fronts. And Ange was also sacked on the proviso that, okay, well, the next manager will make us more defensively solid. But actually, we're still one of the sort of bottom half percentage top 5 leagues of conceding goals in Europe, conceding shots in Europe as well, certainly in the Premier League as well. So we haven't improved our defensive really. Like, the football is bad. We were also told that, the next coach will be a player improver. And, people argue, well, the players aren't good enough. Well, that kind of assumes that sort of player talent is static. Well, actually, coaches could improve players. We look at the Pochettino era. Again, I don't want to keep going back to repeating history. But Mauricio Pochettino improved every single player that he worked with. I can't name a single player that's improved this season so far. And we were told, we'll bring in a coach to develop players. Well, we're not developing anything. We're not developing a star. We've got no identity. So what on earth was this sacking for at the end of the day? And I reiterate, I'm not saying that we should then go back and get Ange. I'm just saying we were promised better. We were promised compete on all fronts. We were promised this, and this, and none of it has been delivered.
I think also, just on that point, just to bring you in, Connor, that I think the expectation that certainly I had with Frank was that the ceiling might not be as high as with Ange, but the floor and much higher consistency throughout would be there. I think one of the things that I would see from Tottenham, certainly, despite the fact of how imbalanced and how poor the squad is, because I do think the squad is poor in terms of what he's got to work with, I thought we would be a lot more harder to beat, well-disciplined, which I saw in some of the initial games to begin with. But the only consistency so far with Spurs is that we've just been regularly really, really bad. And in our bad performances, the concern is then you see a worse one afterwards. And that's continued a theme throughout the course of the season so far. We've had so many poor performances that I think you just get accustomed to almost accepting how bad they've been without actually realising how many displays we've had at such a poor level. What do you think, Connor, at the moment? I mean, you say there, for you, you feel like you've unfortunately maybe got it wrong in terms of backing this manager from what you've seen so far. But do you think, we're sitting here saying at the moment, from what we're seeing in the media, they are backing Thomas Frank. But is the reality at the moment, is it just almost a stay of execution almost per game with what we're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, to give some balance, though, I mean, those types of comparisons like that one there with the first 16 games is not quite the way you really should think about looking at data comparisons, because one, who did we play in those 16 games? It's not the exact same game. Secondly, this is Ange's second season when he's already had, time working with the squad and multiple transfer windows. So it's, you're not quite comparing apples with apples, to be fair, when you make that comparison. And then, if we brought this up every week from now until the end of the season, Ange's numbers basically stayed the same as that, because we then ended up getting 15 points from 22 games or whatever it was, right? So, I don't think it's particularly balanced to make those comparisons, but I appreciate it gives you something on social media, right? But that being said, as I sort of said in my first piece, we need to see something from Frank right now. Now, I think Ash made the point, and I've been saying this a couple of times, he's been more pragmatic and more cautious at Tottenham than he was at Brentford. Definitely, 100%. I mean, I watched Brentford several times last season. Brentford, if you remember, I know they played a lot of their goals were on the transition, but they scored, more goals than Ange's Tottenham did, and they were, I think, 4th or 5th or whatever for goals scored. He was often playing an aggressive man-to-man press, whereas with us, he hasn't done that hardly at all. There's a really good video John McKenzie from The Athletic did, comparing Dyche's approach to the Forest game versus Frank's approach to the Forest game out of possession. This is Sean Dyche, by the way. This is not De Zerbi. And it's night and day in terms of bravery off the ball. Murillo's pushing in, marking Xavi, so the whole Forest team pushes up the pitch accordingly, whereas we're the complete opposite of that. And so, and I don't know whether it's because Frank has got this sort of innate nervousness because he's like a bit of imposter syndrome or whatever it is about the job being too big for him, and now it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle once you start getting that pressure from the media because you've got more than 2 people in the press room. You've now got a press room full of people. Is he so scared of losing? That's what it feels like to me. And so that's why I've been disappointed with Frank, because he hasn't done the good things that I saw and the reason why I was supporting that appointment. Now, obviously, that could still change in the coming weeks if they do stick by him. But, I do think, though, the manager is one, we were talking about it before, the manager is one aspect of, there are much, much bigger problems at this football club, which are as a result of that structural decline over 6 years minimum. And unfortunately, I think that is going to be really difficult to get us out of. I mean, there were some stats some guys have given in the chat there around how many wins we've got in 80 odd games. It's like 29 wins or something. I mean, that is
I'm going to come on to that now.
Absolutely,
I'm about to come on to that.
Absolutely abysmal, and stats that you should never be seeing at a club like Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah. Just on those stats to bring Ash in again, this is where it's going to bring in, like you just said there, Connor, the wider picture, right? I just want to say a massive thanks to Dano Yudvids on X, who very kindly has created these graphics. I'm sure Dan won't mind us sharing these out as well. So, I mean, to illustrate how bad Spurs are at the moment, which then puts, again, more of an emphasis on the squad, what has been the culture around the club. Spurs have won just 22 of 57 games this calendar year, beating 20 different clubs over this period. And what we're presenting on the screen is the list of those clubs and where they finished the season or where they currently are in the standings. I'm going to just quickly read these out if I can. So there's Liverpool in there. Well, obviously, we lost the return leg 4-0, but there's Hoffenheim who were eliminated in the Europa League phase. There's Tamworth currently 13th in the 5th tier of the English Football League. You've got Elfsborg in there that were eliminated in the Europa League phase. Brentford finished in 10th, currently 14th. Man United of last season that finished 15th. Ipswich last season that finished 19th. AZ Alkmaar currently 13th in the Conference League. Southampton who finished bottom. Frankfurt currently 30th in the Champions League. Burnley currently 19th. Leeds currently 17th. Villarreal currently 35th in the Champions League. Everton, who are 9th at the moment in the Premier League. Bordeaux currently 32nd in the Champions League. Man City, maybe the anomaly that sticks out there, but we always seem to beat Man City. I don't want to do that down, but Man City currently 2nd. You've got Doncaster 20th in League One. West Ham currently 18th in the Premier League. Copenhagen currently 24th in the Champions League. And Slavia Prague currently 33rd in the Champions League. I think what this data is showing us here, Ash, to bring you in, is, let's be honest about it, the teams that Tottenham have beaten over, that period, 22 out of the 57 games of this calendar year, they are sides that, with all due respect, are of a level that you would be expecting Tottenham to beat, bar maybe Manchester City in there. Is that a big problem that is systemic with Connor goes on that point there, that there's a culture, unfortunately, around the football club of losing, and that's not going to be easy to turn around in the space of 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, so obviously, as we said already, 50% will be of Ange and 50% would be of Frank. And so you're saying it's an overall arching problem as a cultural problem. And I would put it down to maybe strategy in terms of recruitment. And Spurs, at the moment, we've got a chance where they can undo some of the strategies. As I mentioned before, we went for more of a youth centric kind of model last season, and the club obviously admitted that they got it a bit wrong, and hence why Frank has come out saying, he wants more players that are senior, not saying senior in age, but senior as an experience. So I think that has resulted in some of those results and some of those performances, because I think that's the main thing what lots of fans are looking at, is how we perform against some of those teams. And maybe why when we come against like the Chelseas, I think that upset a lot of the fan base. Arsenal especially, that rattled a lot of heads, the way we kind of laid over. And then we obviously lost against Newcastle in the cup, so that meant a lot to a lot of people, and they were all kind of close to each other. And so it kind of brought back feelings of last season where we lost 22 league games and we didn't really see any upward trajectory. So I personally think you could say culture. What does that mean? Like, what does culture mean? Like, if we have to break that down, and that's why I like to talk about strategy and recruitment. And I think the plan has to be, if you want to talk about something tangible, that we need to have players coming in that go into that starting 11. Now, Frank's obviously mentioned that he wants to get players in that starting 11. That hasn't been our approach before. So I think if Frank is, well, by the looks of it, they want to back him. If he manages to get past Liverpool, he manages to get past Palace, and Brentford was the third game, I think, then, and has performances on top of it, because I don't think the results are enough, because he will still have a lot of doubts. It's about, will players look at Frank as a guy like, yeah, I want to come and play for you? Because I think that's where some of us fans have a little bit of doubt. Does he have that aura? Can he gauge players and encourage players to come? Because remember, when we first come, Ricky, we were talking about Champions League and Premier League. Do you remember? And I said, oh, bro, come on, man. Like, we need to ease up, like, slow it down, because they're doing all these sound bites.
That's what the club are telling us. But this is what
Yeah,
the club are
that's
telling
what I'm
us.
saying. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, raw. Thomas Frank really should be out by that metric, really, if you're thinking about it. If that's, I would love to know what his goals are. Like, where
but
does
what's
he
interesting?
finish?
What's interesting on that, Ash, and you can come back in on this, and we'll go to Billy. It's interesting. Micky van der Ven, when it comes to the sound bites from Micky, when Micky came into the club and was almost asked the question around what the targets are, Daniel illustrated to him that he's built a wonderful training ground, built a wonderful stadium. And again, this is not me saying I want Ange Postecoglou back. This is what Ange Postecoglou apparently said to the player. I'm bringing you to Tottenham to come and win trophies. I want to bring trophies to Tottenham. And the message he's saying for this season is to finish in the top 4. Which, okay, that's the message from the club. But really and truly, I think at the moment, the players are warped and confused a little bit. And the reason why I say that is I think some of the players right now, and even Micky said that in that interview, believe him or not, right? And again, I'm not going to sit here and be a hypocrite, because I was one of, if not one of the biggest, people on here suggesting that Tottenham's performances over 18 months of Ange Postecoglou did not fill with any confidence. And in my opinion, I think it was the right decision to let him go. But I look back now with hindsight, and again, Jason might call that flip-flopping. I think it's, I look back now and did we get this appointment wrong? And the reason why I say that is that I look at the players, the body language, and despite everything on how bad some of those performances were under Ange Postecoglou, and with that context applied around the injuries and the fact that he was resting key players, we saw very little dissent. Maybe that moment with Maddison and Sonny on the bench at one point, where we saw that interaction. But we've seen a lot already under Thomas Frank in terms of dissent. Jed Spence, more than one occasion, coming off, throwing his jacket on the floor. Micky van der Ven strolling past him. My worry at the moment is that I'm not sure these players respect Thomas Frank enough. And they've just come off the back of winning a trophy. And I'm not sure whether these players look at this manager and think he's going to take me any further forward than what the previous incumbent did. And again, I will reiterate what I'm saying. This is no disrespect to Ange Postecoglou. I'm not saying I want Ange Postecoglou back. I've just got this feeling from what I'm seeing with my own eyes in terms of what I'm watching. And look, I might be wrong. I'm not sitting here saying this is what is definitely the case. I'm looking at these players, and I don't feel there's that respect there that there might have been there for Ange. And also on top of that as well, the press conferences, and Bill, you're here for a lot of the shows. We hear a lot of the press conferences. I know a lot of people just don't really want to watch or listen to Thomas Frank. They zone out. Whereas Ange, whatever you thought about Ange's style of football and the tactics, he was box office in terms of those press conferences, right? So this is where I'm really at the moment struggling to gauge what the players are feeling. The fans are low. Something's got to change. Something's got to change.
I think what it is, the word you're looking for is aura. He lacks it. Do you know what I mean? And then on top of the aura, he also doesn't have the credentials to back it. And that's what I said. It's about strategy, because remember, these players have to look and believe in something. And going back to what you said about Micky van der Ven in the interview, trophies, he was hearing trophies, titles. We're going to be the first. That's something you can believe in as a player, especially a young player. And I think that's what a lot of them bought into. If you look at Frank, it's almost like he hasn't really got neither the some people used to call it the salesman talk, or I call it the gallus, where you like a ladies' man, where you're able to swindle and talk. I think Ange was a likable person. You really got behind it. He sounded down to earth. And every time, whether you thought his tactics were like crazy or not, you could still buy into him. But with Thomas Frank, it's harder because he's becoming from that Brentford lower tier team. The perception is like, what from the players, from what I see, why should we listen to him? And he's not playing the style of play that they were enjoying under Ange. And then
Micky,
you're thinking
Micky
about
has reiterated that again. Micky has said
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's the reason why I'm coming with these type of conclusions. After watching that, I was like, okay, wow, that's alarming. I'm seeing. I always say, if you've lost the dressing room, for me, that's when there's issues. That's the problem. That means you can no longer respect the room. And even if you say, guys, I need you to defend and sit back, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to do their own thing and take matters into their own hand. And then if they lose a game, that's coming back to you as a manager. It looks like your tactics are at fault when really they're not listening to you. So in my head, if they're not listening to him and they don't have he hasn't got the respect, then he's got to go, in my opinion. That's how it is, unfortunately. And the last thing I would say is, I think with the whole, actually, no, I'll end it there. I'll let Billy talk.
I think just to bring Billy in, I just need to make this very clear, because I think, again, for the audience, for context, when they listen and watch this back, I don't think anybody has sat here has said, and it's no, again, disrespect to Ange Postecoglou. Look, if you feel this way, guys, you can say it. I don't think anybody's sitting here saying they want Ange Postecoglou back at the football club. And what I find is that the minute you bring Ange's name up, some people just don't even want you to mention his name. I think that's another problem, I have to say, with this Europa League win, that, Bill, to come over to you, we were only really allowed to celebrate that win for less than a week because of the fact there was a decision to be made on the manager. Even now, like when you discuss the Europa League win, there's no way you can even celebrate it, because it goes back to the fact it was won under a manager that many people resented, right? And look, again, I made my feelings clear on that aspect, but how do we come back from the fact that right now we've made our worst start to a season in, 16, 17 years, right? I mean, in reality, based on the stats, I think, being presented to us, we're, conceding goals for fun. I think we've conceded 16 in the last 5 away games. How do we try and build from here, Bill?
I think what Ash was just saying was spot on. I think that, and nowadays on social media, people will call it aura. I think that like going from Brentford to Tottenham is such a massive, massive step up. Not just in terms of the actual size and weight of the job, but just the scrutiny. And I think Connor said it a bit ago as well. Like, if you lose 2-3 games at Brentford, you're going to be going about your week. No one's going to be reporting on it. You lose back-to-back games at Tottenham, it's going to be in the newspapers. You're going to get asked about it in press conferences. You're going to get hate online and things like that. Like the size and jobs is massively, massively different. And I think, Ange, as you mentioned, had a really big personality, a lot of charisma, a lot of aura. And Thomas Frank sort of lacks in those departments. And what he was sort of brought in to do was be, a much more intelligent guy, a player coach, player developer, build good relationship with the players. But we haven't really seen that. We haven't really seen any evidence of that. So I worry about, is the job too big for him? And I think, when we talk about at the moment, I think one of the big things for me at the moment, there is no connectivity between the fans and the players. Like, that's gone. There was that sort of period where every week they were talking about booing, and now the players do the stupid thing where they walk off together. It's coming out in every press conference. I don't want to hear about all that nonsense, to be honest. I think that's an absolute waste of everyone's time. It seemed to have put up some big thing about that in their heads, that it's become a massive issue. And the problem with that is, for me, 6 months ago, we had probably the most connectivity I've ever witnessed at Tottenham with that parade. Like, that parade, and that, if you could bottle that and sort of distill it into sort of, that experience, that's what all fans want. And we gave that up with the proviso of something better. And what's actually happened is we've regressed so far in terms of connectivity that now players are being booed off the pitch. Thomas Frank lost the away fans at the weekend. I always kind of think when you lose the away fans, you're in big trouble. So all of this stuff that we were sort of promised in this new era, and I get the fact that it was Daniel Levy that promised a lot of these things. And as Connor rightly pointed out, Daniel Levy's shadow is going to be lingering over this club for a long time. It's going to take a lot of people, which is why, as we're going to talk about in a bit, they seem to have hired about 5 or 6 different people to do Daniel Levy's job. It was probably ridiculous that one man was doing all of these things. You had that sort of God complex at the club. And that's going to take a lot of time to undo that. And we've regressed so far since we moved into the stadium. That's going to take a lot of time. So in answer to your question, we're going to have to keep spending money to get out of this hole. And let's take what they tell us at face value, that Thomas Frank is the man that they're going to back. Well, they have to go and spend in January. They have to be ambitious. And they have to be relentlessly ambitious in summer, because January is quite a difficult window. You can maybe, at best, we'll add 1 or 2 players to get in the first 11. Then we've had a decent January. That's very rare in January. In summer, we're going to have to keep spending and spending and spending. And that is really the only way we're ever going to get out of this mess. You have to be ambitious, and we have to reset a culture from the top level. I think, as much as I'm personally frustrated with Thomas Frank, the culture comes from the top, and it always has, always will, at the very best football clubs. And hopefully this new board and the 7 or 8 different people that they've hired in the last few months are going to reset the culture, because we seem to have really lost our identity at the moment.
On that point, Bill, very quickly, because we've got a lot to discuss. I'm sorry, this has been a longer conversation than planned, but it always is going to be when you're talking about this aspect of it. Back in Thomas Frank, with regards to the window, right? Are you saying you go full in and back a manager, even though there's those reservations and concerns over whether he's the right man for the job? Or will it be backing him in terms of giving him players that are essentially going to be equipped for anybody to be able to get the best out of? And what I mean by that is someone like, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think we're going to get him. I'd love to get him. Someone like Semenyo, for example, he's a player that, with all due respect, would probably, a lot of managers would want to work with him, right? So my point being is it a case where you're just bringing in such a high-level spec of player that you're not thinking too much about it's for that manager? Because I would imagine that with every poor performance and poor results we've been up to January, Thomas Frank's influence on what he would personally want player-wise will be getting less and less. Is that fair, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. And the problem is, right, if you had the correct club culture, it wouldn't actually matter who the manager was, because it'd be kind of, whoever comes in, well, they're going to play the same kind of style of football. You're going to chop and change. A bit like, I'm not saying, we're on this level of club, because, we have ambitions much higher than Brighton, right? So Brighton doesn't really matter who the manager is. They have a really clear identity. They have a really clear system. They're going to bring in these young players. They're going to, develop them in Brighton, and then they're going to sell them for a lot more money in a few years. It doesn't really matter who the Brighton manager is. They have a really clear identity. Barcelona have a really, really clear identity, where it doesn't really matter that much who the manager is, because the style is so ingrained in their, the culture of a club. We don't really have that at the moment. So, we seem to have been lost. We've gone from Pochettino to Mourinho to Conte to Nuno to Ange to where we are now. There's nothing really which sort of ties any of those managers together. We've lost our identity as a club. So unless we get the identity right from the very top and say, right, doesn't matter who our manager is, we're going to play this style of football and we're going to buy this player to do it, then what you will be doing is what has happened over the last 10, 15 years is you buy players that the manager wants, then you sack the manager, then suddenly you're left with a load of players that no one really wants. So I think in answer to your question, we're probably going to see the latter, where we're going to buy players that Thomas Frank wants. And then, if our recent history is anything to go by anyway, then we might sack Thomas Frank and get someone else in. And then suddenly those players are out of favour, because that's what we've done under ENIC for the last 10, 15 years.
Kind of bringing you in on that point with regards to this new look ball 2.0, the people that were still in and around the football club for 24, 25 years, but are now been obviously given a bit of a clean sweep. Let's be honest about it, Daniel Levy was the noise, right? And he's been removed, however you want to put it, from the boardroom as such, to some degree, in terms of anyway, the chairman of the football club. How do you think they'll approach this January transfer window when there is such concern from fans, and from what we're hearing also internally with regards to Thomas Frank's future? How do they approach a window of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, look, Bill is right that January is difficult, right? Regardless of it being Tottenham or not. So, I think I think best case we can probably hope is one or two come in that make a difference, a bit like that season when we signed Bentancur and Kulusevski, and that pushed us on to then end up getting Champions League that year, right? So I'm not saying that's going to happen from where we are right now, but that type of signing that can inspire and give something different. I think there is a certain level of ambition that can be shown in January, and then the summer is really when we're going to have to judge more. But I mean, just to come back on the Ange point very quickly, because I know that we don't want to keep up. I think what we have to be careful of though is if Frank ends up not being the right man, that doesn't mean it was the wrong decision to sack Ange, right?
This is what I mean. I stand firm. I stand firmly on this. I still believe, in my opinion, it's my opinion, and again, it's not makes me right or whatever. I'm just saying I still believe, Connor, that you come back in. I still believe, based on the 18 months that we saw under Ange Postecoglou, for me, in terms of performances and taking into the context of the injuries, the resting of players, the rotating and everything about that, I still, for me, did not see enough in those 18 months to suggest to me that Ange Postecoglou should have carried on at Tottenham despite winning us a European trophy. I might be wrong for not wanting to carry on momentum. I'm in agreement with you on that. The only points I'm referring to Ange is, for me, that I feel the players are very confused in terms of what...
I agree with that, but I do also think that the players need to have a long, hard look at themselves as well.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
This is where, we've seen manager after manager be thrown under the bus by these players. And, right now, as we've all discussed, Frank is not getting enough from the players either, right? And he needs to be doing more, and he's not shown any green shoots that any of us can get behind. And we're only saying time, as I said before, because we know that you need more time. That being said, though, perhaps these players liked playing under Ange because it was a holiday camp for them. There was no tactical training. The message is basically, go on, lads, go out and express yourselves. That's a very easy way to condition yourself to be. And I think the thing with the Europa, and I agree with Bill's point around the parade, and obviously the parade was fantastic. I was in Bilbao at the game. It was an amazing game to be at, to watch just finally lift the trophy after all that time. But you couldn't enjoy it as much personally as when you've had a fantastic season and then the trophy is the cherry on the top of the fantastic season. I can't forget the week in, week out, I was going over to the Tottenham Stadium and watching us lose at home to Leicester and lose at home to Ipswich and, spend all of that money following the club. So we have to, you have to look at all of this in the round, and we don't know how it would have happened with Ange, if he had stayed, but for me, it was absolutely the right decision. But I think I do get with Frank that, he does need to demand a certain level of respect from the players. And can you see that right now? I'm not sure you can. I think, to be honest, whoever followed Ange had a bit of a difficult job, because some of the players would have still been, to your point, a bit confused about, okay, well, he has won a trophy, why are we not staying with him? And we liked him as a bloke. And so whoever followed him, it's a bit like taking over the sort of, to use a teacher analogy for Bill, he takes over the naughty class in school, and suddenly, he's the new teacher who comes in and has to be a bit stricter and get them to behave. And that's a struggle for that person, right? So, and I think the problem for Frank is he doesn't have necessarily the CV, which isn't his fault. He hasn't won anything. He managed Brentford, right? What were Brentford ever expected to win? But he doesn't have that credibility or gravitas, perhaps, and I think that's the challenge.
I mean, it's mad, isn't it? I mean, we say the name Ange Postecoglou, and the amount of anger and frustration there is just to bringing up his name. It's crazy. I mean, it is, and I mean that's just to come on top of that. Again, people don't like it, but I'm going to mention him again because Micky van der Ven has just done an interview with the Overlap where look, you'd argue, does he risk upsetting Thomas Frank by explaining that he still? But this is again another problem, right? That you're listening and hearing players or Micky van der Ven say that he still believes, whether rightly or wrongly, and Postecoglou's style of play, he believes in it still. Whether people like it or they don't like it, you've got a player that has come out and said that he likes Ange's style of play, but also and seemed to give freedom to both him and Romero to control what happened on the field, which feels like you go back to the kind of 90s under Fergie or whoever, where there will be players taking leadership on the field, right? But again, look, it is complex, this situation that we're in. And I agree with Connor that whoever was to follow Ange Postecoglou, it was never going to be easy. And the reason why I say that is that it wasn't for everyone, but for some. For some, it was a controversial decision. That's a fact. I mean, it wasn't controversial to me personally because I felt we made the right decision. But I know there were a lot of people out there that felt that Ange should have got the third season. And what if to see what might have happened? And if, for example, it wasn't going well after 10, 15 games, then you sack him. And to those people, they are more than welcome to have that view. They're more than welcome to have that view, and they shouldn't just be shut down for that. So, I mean, where are you, Ash, before we come away from this subject?
Yeah, no, I just think that had he not won that trophy, it would be a completely different conversation, but he did. And so that's where the context has been thrown out. We were actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater because 22 defeats for any club is not acceptable, not just Tottenham Hotspurs. Do you understand? Let alone if we're so-called Big Six club financially, we can't be finishing 17th. And I think Micky was saying that, like, yeah, he saved himself and Romero for Europa Cup because that was a cup that he wanted to they wanted to win. So he purposely left them out of the Premier League, knowing that that would sacrifice our position in the actual league. So that was the decision on Ange. So we could look it up both ways. Also, if you look at it that way as well, where he gave him the freedom, Romero's doing this to Ange, like, what's going on here? What?
But also
Romero, Romero the coach?
Yeah.
Is Romero the coach? Is he coaching the team, like throwing out finger signals to the coaching staff? Like, for me, that is mental. And so then now we fast forward to what's going on now, and I go back to Thomas Frank because I say both of them be bad. So Thomas Frank's bringing on Ben Davies. I'm sorry, that's a sackable offense. Pick up Ben Davies, yeah? Listen, he's going to do his coaching badges. That's all I know. But bringing on Ben Davies when you're chasing a game, you're 2-0 down. And I was trying to figure it out. I was like, all right, is he bringing on Ben Davies to maybe push Porro further up? But like the math weren't mathing, like make it make sense. I didn't understand it. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, sorry, I sidetracked to the Ange bit and what Van der Ven. I just think the board looked at it and they wanted to challenge on all fronts. And clearly, we don't have a squad, and we're now finding out.
Yeah,
we don't have a squad.
We don't have a squad. No,
on all fronts. Do you know what I mean? Even in my opinion, if those players were to come back, like your Solankis, your Madisons, because let's have it right. People are going at Madison. Let's not be selective in our memory. When Kulusevski was on form, people didn't like Madison. And then when Kulusevski was running into the ground, yeah, do you not remember that? When he was running to the ground and his form started dipping because he had to do all that pressing, then he had a patella rupture, which now Ange told us, oh, he's only going to be out for, it's just a knock, could be a couple of weeks. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. It's like, that's the reason why, Ricky, the Ange kind of riles people up the wrong way, because there was a lot of things that people were missing out in that information. A lot of content missing out.
No, 100%. Look, I don't think we need to justify why Ange Postecoglou got the sack. I think everyone knows why Ange Postecoglou got the sack. But at the same time, I can acknowledge why, for some fans out there, they wanted to see what was going to happen in the third season, rightly or wrongly. But again, to point out some of the things that Micky interview said, it's not selective. It was made clear, Micky did say we had to speak to Ange because we didn't have a plan B in games, right? There was a lot more control and emphasis on the players having to approach Ange and say, things have got to change. Again, for people asking why we're bringing up Ange, well, a lot of this Micky van der Ven interview relates back to Ange Postecoglou in that overlap interview. For those that haven't seen it, go and watch it. Again, you can pick up out certain things on there. I think the biggest thing for me that would maybe raise some concern and alarm bells is that he's saying that the aim at top of the season is to finish in the top 4. Whereas the previous incumbent, no matter whether you like him or you don't like him, the first thing he said when Micky came to the club was, I want to win trophies here. And I just think after what we saw in Bilbao, I want to see this club win more trophies. And I want that to want to be the message from the very, very top. That doesn't mean bin off the league, because the league is important, but you can have both. You can have a decent league season and you can also have a target of winning trophies. I don't think we've got the squad anywhere near right now to compete. And I think, like a lot of this show, I'm going in circles. But I mean, right now, Bill, I'll be honest with you, I am very, very confused. I feel like I'm like the players. I don't know, Bill, what the right way forward is at the moment.
Yeah, and that all comes down to the fact what we've been saying, that we have no identity. We have no strong leadership. There's no strong leadership at the club whatsoever. Or certainly wasn't at that period that you're talking about anyway, under Daniel Levy. Just said it there. When Andrew was sacked, they were saying it's to compete on all fronts. We wanted to win the league. We wanted the Champions League. Now suddenly that's already been walked back. Do we want to finish in the top 4? Is now the current messaging coming out from the club apparently. So that's already gone backwards. I think the answer to all of these questions, the overarching thing of all of it, is we have had such poor leadership over the last 25 years that it's going to take a lot of time to undo, a lot of time and a lot of money as well. A lot of relentless spending of money is the only way you can really do it. So what we're getting now is basically a hangover, because what people have to remember is, you can forget the managers. Look at the playing squad. We've had Harry Kane or Heung-min Son to bail us out for the last 3, 4, 5 years. This is our first season without either of those players. And we're having the kind of season which we've deserved for never really surrounding those players with star quality. But this is what we're experiencing now, is a symptom of years and years of poor recruitment, no ambition, weak ownership, weak leadership. Doesn't really matter who the manager is, who the player is. At the top level, it's not been good enough. And until we address that, and let's hope with this new appointment, the 7 or 8 new people that they've appointed, the new structure, let's hope that will change, because until that changes, nothing changes.
Well, look, let's go for that next. Let's go for our next break of the show. For our listeners out on audio, we have got nearly 10,000 of you that are watching us live. Thank you ever so much for incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. Look, I'll be honest with you, I think the format has gone a little bit out the window, which is always a concern when you are going to talk about, mention previous 10 years, previous everything around Tottenham. We're joined by Billy T. We're joined by Ash over at Spurs Kings, and we're joined by Connor over at Levynomics 1882. I am conscious of time. I very, very am. And look, we make a point actually on the show that I hope Connor won't mind me sharing here. We're seeing is that for those on audio, we've got a live chat function that runs during the show. I don't think I've ever seen such a, like, I think, we think almost a tribalism of a chat where there is so much anger and frustration over certain players, certain managers. The general club is in such a malaise right now. And on top of that, we're going to fast forward. We're going to come over to you, Connor, because it looks like Spurs are in advanced talks to appoint Carlos Rafael Moersen to take up the role of Director of Football Operations at Tottenham Hotspur. The deal is not yet complete, but is expected to be finalised soon. Now, Moersen, known as Rafi, has spent the last 10 years working for CFG clubs and currently serves as the company's Director of Football Transactions. He's part of the global football operation led by CFG's Managing Director, the one-time England international Brian Marwood. He's quickly risen through CFG, where he's a highly rated individual. His role includes negotiating contracts with current and prospective Man City players with the Etihad Stadium team, serving as CFG's flagship club. Connor, I think many people would want to know, this is the same organisation that Tottenham took Scott Munn from. So, I mean, with all due respect, how happy, excited, what mood should fans be on that news of this new appointment imminent to Tottenham? What does it mean for them, do you think?
Look, he can't play left wing or centre midfield, so I don't know how excited anyone can ever get over, a board appointment or someone joining the leadership team. But look, I think with Scott Munn, the City Football Group generally are a really well-run group, right, of football clubs, and so I wouldn't judge every appointment by how bad Scott Munn was, and who knows as well, to be honest, what the ins and outs of what Scott Munn's remit actually was, given what we know about Levy and his micromanagement. And I always think, when we judge past directors of football, etc., it's always hard to really know because the parameters are not set by them, right? And so who knows? My biggest takeaway from this, and I think Bill touched on it earlier, is we've made, per that chart, 5 or 6 appointments, including Vinay, right, in terms of in that sort of executive leadership team. New chief commercial officer coming in, new chief communications officer, new chief marketing officer, director of football operations, new performance director who is going to look after the medical stuff is new. We've now obviously brought Paratici back, and so I think what it shows you, if nothing else, is how much Levy was doing himself and why that was completely unsustainable. And to be honest, probably also why we started, as well as the sort of approach that ENIC took from a monetary side of things, i.e. not spending enough and not spending enough on wages, also just this level of micromanagement that you just never see at an organisation the size of Tottenham. And I think the problem for Levy was he could never quite grasp that, okay, you're no longer running a business that's worth 90 million. You're now running a business that's worth 4 billion. And it's very, very different, right? And you need to have a team in place and you need to delegate. And unfortunately, I don't think he could ever quite grasp that. So I think that's why we're seeing these hires. And I think hopefully it'll be positive in terms of what that means for us as a structure going forward. But ultimately, none of this will really matter unless there is a complete change in the way that they think about spending money, right? You can hire all the people you want and pay them, and but until you sort of change the way that your attitude towards wages and your attitude towards how much you spend and invest on the football team, and the football team being a priority, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. You're on mute, Rick.
Forgive us. Well, number one question I want to ask you kind of very quickly is, if this guy is that talented and that good, why is he leaving this organisation?
The role is normally I think right now he's director of football transactions there. Maybe he's a smaller cog as part of a bigger wheel of the whole City group. He sees, coming in as the director of football operations as a bigger role, more money. It's just the standard reasons. Why would why does anyone who's high performing at their job move jobs, right? I think there could be a whole multitude of reasons. Man City will probably try to keep him, but it might just be more of an exciting challenge for him.
I just think, Bill, coming over to you, I feel like the Scott Munn appointment and just how poorly that seemed to work out really has made me sceptical. I just think at the moment, with regards to ENIC in general, I'm very sceptical about everything. I'm going to remain sceptical until I really see what happens in the next couple of windows to really give me any kind of assurance or confidence that there's a strategy or a direction. Because until then, I think the jury's out, Bill. And I'm talking to someone probably. I'm talking to the convert. I'm preaching to the converted. You're all right, Bill, probably.
Yeah, mate, exactly. And Connor's exactly right. As fans, and I think the only reason why we've had brilliant chats over the last few months or whatever is because of how bad it's been. Like, as football fans, we shouldn't be going into conversations about who the director of football operations is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care who that is. The only reason I care about it is if he's winning me a football match. And at the moment, we've not had that for a very long time. And that's why we're getting drawn into these conversations. If these people are doing their jobs, we shouldn't even know that they exist. Do you know what I mean? The only reason we know they exist is because it's been so catastrophically bad. Like, Scott Munn was apparently running the training ground day to day. Like, why do I care about this guy? Why am I being told about what this guy does? And the only reason is because we've been unsuccessful for the last few years. So I'm skeptical about ENIC. I still kind of think like they've done a public rebrand thing with the Lewis family when really they're still ENIC. They keep going by the Tavistock Group instead of ENIC because ENIC has got such bad publicity attached to it. Yeah. Until we see changes on the pitch, I don't think anything. I don't really care about anything else. And I'm definitely still have some air of skepticism about it, because at the end of the day, the people above Levy are still the same people. The people that were, majority shareholder of our football club are still the same people. So until that changes, until the on the pitch stuff changes and we go out and spend more ambition in the transfer, because all we care about as fans in terms of this stuff, right, is are our club ambitious and do they spend money to win trophies?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of level I want to be analysed. I don't care who's going to be running the training ground. Not to say that I'm not devaluing anything that we've spoken about. It's just as football fans, we just get so lost sometimes in these conversations, particularly at Tottenham. I don't know any other football club where the chairman on the ownership takes so much conversation, and that's specifically because of Daniel Levy and like how he's the god complex of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. I just want to concentrate on winning my football team winning and winning trophies. That's all I want to concentrate on as a fan.
But it goes back to that point, doesn't it? Like we've said here, Ash, on the show, we've not had many wins to get behind. Again, sorry, Dan at Yidvid, I'm so sorry to bring this up. This is a very good, I think, graphic of where we are, right? This has been the fan mood in the last, 12, 18 months of this football club, right? Mm-hmm. So the fan mood for listeners on audio, we're presenting a graphic which shows you the fan mood, okay? So it's got a year. This is Dan, bless you, from Yidvid, at Yidvids on X. The mood from January has been bottom of the pile. It then goes right to the top for May for the Europa League final. We stay on that kind of steady line at least until August, September, where there's been decent form. Then we rocket back down to November, December. Does that really summarise, Ash, why there is so much anger and frustration and scepticism to believe anything right now? Because the fan mood is so low, based on the football, based on there being so many things around the club that it's very hard to get behind at the moment.
Yeah, I think this is where I believe the word culture comes from, because most Spurs fans are now pessimistic. We don't really believe that things can be good. If they're good, it's too good to be true. And so we always have our heads, when we try to guard our hearts, we have the glass half empty with a lot of news that coming in. This should be something that's positive, in my opinion, because Levy was the one that literally, I think Connor said it, or Billy, I can't remember. He was over everything. He was micromanaging everything. And I think what Vinay is doing is he's actually separating some of the job roles. He's alleviating some of the responsibilities across the club, and he's trying to bring in experts in the field. So I personally think, from what I'm reading right now, I'm just reading up on this guy, Rafi Moersen. I don't know anything about him. I'm just reading what I've seen. He's not just a City group. He was actually part of Man City club. Yeah, that's number one. Yeah. Number two, he's a part of the dealings with Erling Haaland. So if he's doing that transaction, and Levy,
Levy, it's definitely Erling rather than Ealing. It's not his brother, is it? No, we get the wrong. No, we'd sign the wrong Haaland.
Yeah, so Haaland. Let me just say Haaland. So the point I'm trying to make is he's a part of that title-winning Man City, and I'm not saying Spurs are gonna all of a sudden sign the best, but I just remember my frustration with Levy was that he used to haggle so much, and then he'd be like, "What? How much is it?" And then we wouldn't hear anything. So if he's bringing over a guy that's gonna come in and he's just the final piece, he's not doing the scouting. Obviously, we need our Paraticis, whatnot, to handle that. Obviously Langer's involved. Who knows? This guy's, it says football director operations is what I'm reading. So my optimism is maybe, who knows, Langer, if he doesn't pull his socks up, he could be out of the job, and Paratici might be taking full reins of this, or this new guy might have a new role put into this. So for me, I'm looking at it as like, right, this should be positive. Like, why are we looking at it like, I do get it, City Group, Scott Munn, innit? But from what I'm reading, executive, like head of football operations.
It sounds good, but do you know what? It's awful, isn't it? You're sitting here right now because of everything that's happened over this last how many years with a football club. You question. I mean, about Connor. He said me that thing earlier. I'm looking at always for like when you get a credit card statement, you look at the bottom for the you're looking at the bottom for the blueprint and think, I'm looking to see what's the catch. Always, everything. I'm looking to see what is the catch.
I think it's to Bill's point, isn't it? I think it's the point is it's like no other football club has to talk about this stuff as often because they're not because they're not a shit show. off the pitch
It's
as
true. I
we
don't know
have been.
anybody else that covers the subject. When I listen to other football podcasts, I don't know any other conversations like this around other football podcasts of clubs like Tottenham. I just don't.
No, and I think the only stuff you ever see on the finances at other football clubs, to be honest, is that one time a year the finances come out and they'll do a quick little podcast covering the latest set of accounts. I mean,
Yeah.
I've created a Twitter account based on how much crap we have going on at Tottenham behind the scenes. So it just is. It's just constant, and it's boring for people, right? We want to be concentrating on what's going on the pitch, but unfortunately, all of that stuff and what's gone so wrong there impacts everything on the pitch, right? And that's there you go, corporate circus. I mean, I was thinking about just some of these hires, like the new guy that they're bringing in to look after the medical department. Well, the medical department has been an absolute shambles at Tottenham for how many years? And is that because, again, it was an area we underinvested in? The academy has not produced a single player other than Harry Kane, really, of any note for how many years, whereas clubs around us in London have. Again, is that because we underinvested in the academy for years and years and didn't give it its due time? So it is just an absolute shambles.
You said highs there with plural. I was waiting for you to kind of fill me in what the other highs were, apart from winning the Europa League. When you said highs, I was thinking, what?
Highs, yeah.
Oh, highs. Okay, sorry.
Highs.
That's right. Sorry, highs. I was thinking, what highs have we got?
No, there's been no highs other than
Other than the trophy, there's no highs. Bill, look, I know we're very conscious of time. I need to come round to you. Just mention a couple of players as to where we're at with regards to their future, and also coaches there as well. Bissouma are expecting to go. Brennan Johnson, those links seem to be ramping up now with regards to a possible January move for him. And just Matt Wells, maybe focusing on Johnson and Matt Wells, the implications of both leaving. How much does that affect Tottenham from a coaching perspective, losing Matt Wells and Brennan Johnson? Would you be in favour to see him leave? Top goal scorer last season. Can't get a look in under Thomas Frank at the moment.
What I'm hoping for, mate, is that the reason that Matt Wells has been delayed so long is because Thomas Frank's going to end up at Colorado. That's what I'm hoping for. But, I'm not holding my breath with that one. That's what I'd love. But I think in terms of Matt Wells, right, everything that I hear about him, everything you see about him in terms of the coach, in terms of the players, he was really, really positive. Players seem to love him. Son spoke a lot about him when he left. Players, but again, we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, do we? Apparently, he's currently our defensive coach, and he was under And as well. And our defense has been a shambles under both managers. So who knows how true that is? I think in terms of personality-wise, I think he's really highly regarded and well respected. And I believe, if I'm right in thinking, I'm sure I've read that he's proper. He's got Tottenham relatives, hasn't he, that have been at the club for a long time. There's a culture of Tottenham, and it's a shame. Yes, always a shame to lose people like that. Because when we talk about our identity and having an identity, people like that are what holds the identity of Tottenham being Tottenham together. So that's a shame. I hope it's not a big loss for us on the pitch, but I wish him well because he does seem to be a really well-liked person. In terms of Brennan Johnson, I think this is what I'm talking about in terms of having no club identity whatsoever. We've gone from a manager where Brennan Johnson is a sort of a key part of his system and a perfect system player for Ange Postecoglou to now a completely different system, completely overhauled, when Johnson just does not fit in any sense whatsoever. Like, when the Johnson performances that we've seen under Thomas Frank, he looks lost completely because he's not a 1v1 winger. Like under Ange, he was a back post specialist. When we played Ange ball, worked pretty well. I think, I think Johnson's always going to have criticism because he doesn't tend to do a lot other than score goals. Well, you could also argue that, that's obviously the most important thing. And he's one of our best players to do it. But I just think, again, it sort of speaks to that identity that we've lost, that he doesn't, and this is what the problem is with Tottenham, is we have so many different managers with different styles that players like Johnson, who we spent £50 million on, you get a new manager with a completely different system, and that's 50, that's gone. That asset is completely unusable almost, which is a problem. So I do think he will be sold. And, again, given all of us one of the best memories in our lifetime, so wish him well. But I think Johnson is a really clear indication of what happens when you don't get the culture right at a football club, and you're just going from random manager to random manager, and suddenly a £50 million asset is rendered useless.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, just come over to you, Ash, on this. I'm very conscious of time. 27 goals, 18 assists, and 104 appearances for the club. Got the winner in the Europa League final. Again, someone else, you mentioned his name, and people don't want you to talk about it, right? I want to move on from him. You only want to mention his name. Again, sorry, we have to bring his name up because he's being linked with a move right now. Ash, what do you make of that? And again, I know we touched with you on Friday, I think, about Matt Wells. No indication right now how close a move that is to, of course, the MLS. Brendan Johnson, is that the wrong decision, Ash, to be letting him go based on what you've seen in his time at Tottenham so far and his lack of appearances under Frank, of course, this season?
Yeah, I think it comes down to wants and needs. And at the moment, I think he's a player that is surplus to requirements because of what he offers, or the lack of what he offers, to be fair, in possession. I think that's the biggest thing. If you're going to be playing out wide, we've seen it with Kudos. I know Johnson is a final actions type of player, and goals are the hardest things to come by. But I don't think the system negates his strengths. And I think if you're a coach and you're looking at Johnson and you know he can score goals, you either would tweak the system to get the best out of players like Johnson, or you would just say to yourself, you know what? I don't think you're the right player for my system moving forward. Obviously, he did wonders for Ange. Ange's system, he was at the back post, he would tap in. But how Frank sets up, I think he's a little bit isolated at times and he doesn't know his role. He's tried him on the left a couple times, trying to kind of recreate what Kevin Schade does for Brentford. And it hasn't quite worked out for him. So, yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes you just have to move on, and Billy's already said it. Sometimes if you can get a fee for some of those players, now's the time to strike when the iron's hot. Obviously, friend of the show, as you know, Ricky, Paul O'Keefe, has been tweeting. There's been a few transfer links at the moment, and there's been a few heavy links with defensive midfielders. Nathan the Cat being one of them, from Anderlecht. He's a highly touted youngster. I know people don't like that, but he's got experience. Again, someone that is a progressive passer, something that matches what we need. But there's another player, because I know everyone's like, oh, not another youngster. There's another player we've been linked with as well from Atletico Madrid. And he's a player who's 22, Pablo Barros. Again, a defensive midfielder, centre midfielder, and attacking midfielder, so he can play all three roles. Technical on the ball, can play forward passes. So, and apparently the fee is around 70 million. Yeah. So this is it. Like, maybe Spurs are trying to actively pursue players, and to make way, you're gonna need to have players like Johnson to depart. We might not get a winger for winger or player for like, but we might get something else in return in another position, which we desperately need. Do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I guess we'll have to see how this pans out. I mean, I'm just at the moment trying to get myself geared up for January, but then I keep reminding myself we've still got games to try and fill the next few weeks. I'm thinking this is going to be a really, really tough time ahead. Con, I want to try and leave the show on some optimism, right? You know, Liverpool at the weekend. I think Liverpool's always kind of a bit of a glamour game, similar to when Tottenham play Man United, right? It's a game that, you know, always does draw attention. Tottenham versus Liverpool always draws attention. It will draw even more focus now, I think, because of the nature of how bad our home has been this season and the need to see a home performance, right? And look, we did beat Brentford, of course, which on the back of, I think, the run we had, and this again is another thing I'm seeing as well. There's a lot of revisionism about the wins that we've had recently, the Copenhagen, the Slavia Prague, and the Brentford, because of the tactics around how those wins came about and how we were benefiting from the opposition being the opposition that got us those wins. With Liverpool coming to town on Saturday, Connor, where is your mind for that game? Because all I just keep seeing is, and forgive me, I'm just seeing more and more games from the club they're trying to sell tickets for in terms of home games at the moment. It feels like attendances are dropping massively at the moment, trying to get fans on seats at home games.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there is we've spoken about it before. There's a number of fundamental issues, right, that are causing the issues at Tottenham Stadium, which, you know, I coined the cauldron of toxicity before we played Brentford and actually won a game, because it became that, right, in terms of, you know, fans are fed up. That it's been, you know, 6 years since we moved into that new stadium. You're paying some of the highest ticket prices in Europe, and you're watching crap, right? So you can see why fans are getting fed up. And then it's that sort of death by a thousand cuts of structural decline over a number of years that just at a time when you've also got, Christmas around the corner and there's a lot of games being played at home as well. And so, the pricing has been wrong at times as well. I think they could have. It's difficult, obviously, doing this retrospectively after.
I think just to give a
games
bit
have
of credit,
already
they seem
gone
to
on
have
now.
priced the FA Cup game correctly. The Villa
I was
game
about to say, yeah, that is better. £30 is good. I think that
for
is
the adults. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they've obviously learned a little bit there, but there needs to be more of that, and I think there needs to be that's an easy way to win over some sort of goodwill from fans is pricing games at
Well,
a good rate where
also,
you go.
if we win the games as well, that'll be another way to win them over.
That will help more. Yeah. Look, the stadium would be full if we were, winning. To be honest, that's the way it works, right? But yeah, I think it's challenging with the home form at the moment. I mean, you've asked me to finish with some optimism. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you any because I can't see us beating Liverpool at home on the weekend with the way that we are right now and the fact that they're now seeing a little resurgence a little bit. Yeah, I can't give you any, unfortunately, Rick. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one thing I will give the credit for, and thanks Luke as well for putting this out. They are, a campaign around the mental health aspect of what's going on right now. I think is really, really important. I think we're also acutely aware. Look, time of year in general, a lot of people struggling out there. Listen, I think again we shouldn't underestimate just how difficult life is in general, right? And I think football is meant to be served as an escapism, and when your escapism is so unenjoyable as this, it does make it even more tougher, right? I mean, can I ask Bill, do you have any optimism going into the game against Liverpool on the Saturday? What do you think from your perspective, Bill? And I think Bill might have even frozen on us there. We'll let Ash come in on that. Ash, can you give any fans optimism with regards to Liverpool? We'll go to Billy to close.
Yeah, a lot of fans are telling me, opposition fans, that Liverpool's defense are woeful at the moment. He said, "Yeah, you'll get a result." Obviously, they're not feeling as depressed as us, so that's the reason why they're a lot more optimistic than I am. But yeah, I think their fullbacks, they like to push ultra high the way Slot's got them playing, and he's trying to figure out that midfield rotation. He's trying to get that balance right along with the strikers, and so they can be got at, basically. And one thing I do know about Frank's system is he does like players or teams to kind of come onto him. So then we saw it against Slavia Prague when they tried to do a man-to-man press. We're able to play through them. The space was in behind. You saw players like Archie Gray was able to run in behind. Xavi Simons was able to run in behind as well. But especially the flanks. If you've got players like Kirkes, defensively, for me, he's not solid. So I think that side, that could be definitely exploited. And then you've got the right-hand side. They got Bradley there. Again, going up and down the pitch, up that right-hand side, not too bad, but those are the areas where I think we can get them. And also their centre-back, Van Dijk's not having a great season, and his centre-back pairing, it's not the best at the moment. So there is a glimmer of hope. But yeah, that's all I can see from a Spurs perspective in terms of us trying to cause them any damage. But yeah, they've won their last couple of games, so I feel
they're
like
unbeaten. I think in 4, aren't they? They're unbeaten in 4.
They're literally turning a corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I apologize because I'm still not 100% on my pronunciations today. But yeah,
don't worry, mate.
Billy.
Don't be silly. Let's get Billy to close us. Not permanently. Although that could be. Although to be fair, the way the mood is, that might not be a bad thing. There must be other things to podcast about in this world, isn't there? Bill, is there anything you can serve us up apart from an X tweet to get us excited? Not an X as an X, but a tweet rather than going down that God. What is that route going down? What can you give us, Bill, ahead of this week?
I mean, all I can tell you is that after that Liverpool game, it'll be one day closer to Christmas. That's all I can offer, because I have no optimism on the pitch. But I just hope, the last word on Spurs family have a lovely Christmas outside of football, because I don't think we're going to get a lovely one inside of it. So, see your families, see your friends. Don't worry about your football team because they're not going to help us, I'm afraid.
How can we close on this? Honestly, you know what? It's deja vu, isn't it? And this, I was saying this the other day, actually, just to close it on this. We're having the same conversations now that we're having over the last 3, 4, 5 years. We're just on repeat. Like, we are literally on repeat. And I think this is really an important thing to say. We had a lot of conversation around this show about Thomas Frank talking about Ange, which, as I said, it just upsets people the minute you bring his name up. But this is, like Connor has said, and like everyone said on here, this is right from the top right in terms of the issues that we're facing structurally. And I stupidly thought, maybe wrongly, on the back of what we were told about the winning the Europa League final, that was the springboard to success. But what I'm realising now, which again, stupid of me to not even have even had this thought, that it's going to be more pain probably coming, isn't it? It's actually not.
As we said many times, me and you, over summer and last few years.
Yeah.
It's quite what sums it all up as it can't go on like this, can it? It can. And it will.
I just think, this is the thing, people say, you just won a trophy, but it feels like such a long time ago already, doesn't it? It feels like a lifetime ago. And here we are again. It's like, go back to what Jason said at the start of the show. Got rid of Levy, won the trophy. And it's like, Connor says, there's just so many other issues. My
advice to everyone to be doing what I'm doing right now and start supporting Man City in the title race. That's the true joy of this football club. It's that time of year where Man City win every single game of football. Arsenal hopefully slip in. Now we've got to get the small wins where we can.
Oh, I tell you. Okay. Look, I think we'll let the audience go away and come off the couch, because I've got a feeling we might have a few more of these to come between now and Christmas, and who knows. I want to say a massive thank you, Con. Welcome back. I think you've got a couple more shows with us to come, and certainly a January period where hopefully there will be some excitement on there, wouldn't there, Con? Any? A little bit?
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. We need it, don't we? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been good to be on. Nice therapy session with Bill and Ash as well. And come on, you Spurs, and come on, City, I suppose.
We're not wearing all City shirts for the next episode, are we? God's sake. Ash, thank you. We wish you better. Ash having a bit of illness as well at the moment. Ash, we're wishing you better. Bill, thank you so much. And look, to everybody out there, I'm so acutely aware of the amount of love we get for the show. And I just want to say a massive thank you again, because it's not easy to have to keep turning up whilst we do the podcast. We've got amazing guests on here. The audience are always so loyal to turn up and listen and watch the show. And I just wish we're talking more positively. We really don't want to be talking like this. I think that's the thing. People think we're conditioned to keep doing like this. We want to be positive. We want to feel like things are going in the right direction. But you can't just blindly just feel it's going to change when at the moment what we're seeing on the pitch isn't good enough. Look, we wish Thomas Frank all the very best, because that would be stupid to not wish the manager all the very best for Liverpool to come. Let's see what they're going to give us from Connor, from Ash, from Billy, from me. We've been the last one on Spurs. Thank you so much for all your support for the show. To Danny Kiriakou, never thought Ben Davies would outlast Daniel Levy, #goals. And we're asked the question, should we go for Igor Thiago? I think right now, look, not a bad player, but I think we've got a lot more pressing things on the horizon. Igor Thiago right now, whether we should be moving for him. But from Connor, from Ash, from Billy, from me, thank you so much for your support. We've been the last one on Spurs. Keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you Spurs.